Listen, it's hard coming on here and doing post-game videos after the Bulls lose, especially after their 7th loss in 9 games, which is likely going to be 8 losses in their last 10 after they play the Suns on Friday. And the thing that bothers me the most as a Bulls fan, and I talked about this in my post-game video the other night in the loss against the Kings, is that it could not have come at a worse time. The Bulls have 13 games left now on their schedule. They have the hardest schedule to close out the season, and they're in a complete freefall. The loss tonight, and yes, I'm recording this after the game, but won't be uploading it until the morning since it's pretty late. But the loss tonight drops the Bulls to 5th in the standings, with the Celtics win over the Warriors, propelling them to the 4th spot. This was a Bulls team that was just a month ago sitting with the number 1 seed in the East, which we knew this kind of thing could happen given the fact that, the East race was pretty tight at the top, given the fact that the Bulls had been plagued by injuries. And to be fair, I predicted the Bulls would finish the season with the 5th seed before the season started back in October. So to some extent, it's kind of like we as Bulls fans, maybe we shouldn't be too greedy. This is by far and away the best Bulls team we have seen really since 2015. It's been the most relevant and exciting team the Bulls franchise has had in a long time. We went from being a lottery-bound bottom feeder in the East, being head coached by Jim Boylan with Ryan Arcidiacono getting rotational minutes, to now being a legitimate playoff contender. Like, are we really just being too greedy at this point? Well, that's the thing with sports. Whether it's fair or not, an expectation gets set, and if you exceed those expectations, it's great, but the fan base is still going to expect you to maintain the performance that you were putting out that led to those exceeded expectations. And for the Bulls, with the way they came out firing to start off the season, playing with effort, energy, defensive tenacity, speed, and pace, the chemistry was on point, you established that this is what the Bulls fans can expect of this team for this season. You established that this is a legitimate team that is going to make a deep playoff run. You established that despite all of the haters who thought that this team was still going to be trash, that you proved them all wrong. And now it just seems like those early days of the season in which this team was the Showtime Bulls every night, that has gone by the wayside. Now, yes, I'm aware injuries are a factor. There's no question about that. Patrick Williams has been basically out all season. Lonzo and Caruso have missed considerable time, as well as Zach Lavine missing time here and there, and of course Derrick Jones Jr. too. But look, the injuries aside, do not excuse effort. They do not excuse playing smart basketball. And let's be real too, like the injury excuse no longer really applies as much, considering we're just missing Lonzo and Patrick Williams at this point, which, yes, very impactful players in terms of what the Bulls do, especially Lonzo, but you can't sit here and tell me that all of this would be resolved the second Lonzo Ball comes back. Maybe it is. I hope that actually ends up being the case, but there are broader issues going on with this team that span more than just missing Lonzo Ball in the lineup at this point. Now, as far as the game against the Jazz tonight, what I will say is that I was glad to see the Bulls at least keep this competitive really until the last 6 minutes or so of the 4th quarter. The Bulls even took a lead at one point in the 3rd where momentum was starting to shift on their side, and I actually thought that they might be able to come away with a win in this one. But what bothered me about this game was the lack of urgency on the part of the Bulls. The lack of game planning and scouting, which is on coaching, and I'll get into in a little bit, but the Bulls not hustling out to the perimeter to defend the three-point shooter, knowing the Jazz are one of the best three-point shooting teams in the league, and they didn't even have Bogdanovic tonight. Not fighting for rebounds in the paint, which I know you're going against the best rebounder in the game right now, but at least trying to be more physical in the paint and not getting pushed around on every single play. The Bulls' effort tonight on the defensive end was piss poor, and at times it looked like they didn't even care with how lost they got on that end of the floor. I'm not saying that it was for the whole game, but it was a good portion of it. What's funny is that the Jazz turned the ball over quite a bit in this game, but most of them were unforced turnovers in which it was just a bad pass or they lost the ball. The Jazz were 19 for 39 from 3. Donovan Mitchell alone, 9 for 15. Dude had 25 points alone in the 3rd quarter, which really set the tone in the 2nd half. But anyway, you just didn't see the type of effort you would expect from this Bulls team, knowing they're fighting for playoff positioning in the final games of the season. And I guess I shouldn't be too hard on this game because it was against the Jazz and it was on the road. I think this is more me just venting still from the loss against the Kings the other night, but still, it's surprising to me how much the edge and chip on the shoulder of these guys that they once had has completely fallen off. Now, the bright side of tonight was that Zach Lavine had one of the best games that we've seen in months. He was being aggressive, more calculated with his shot selection, and was efficient on offense and actually seemed to care on defense as well, which is good to see. Zach finished the game with 33 points on 11 for 20 shooting, 5 for 10 from 3, 5 assists, and 3 steals, and he also only had 1 turnover as well. So it was great to see Zach finally heating up and playing like the old Lavine that we saw from him at the beginning of the season. But it was at the downfall of the fact that Vucevic had a very poor game tonight, one of his worst of the season. He shot horribly, 5 for 14 from the floor, and was 0 for 6 from 3, a night when he really needed to take advantage of his three-point shot, knowing that Gobert isn't the type of big that comes out and defends the perimeter that often. Gobert was just toying with Vucevic tonight on both ends of the floor in the paint. And this is a game in which you have to see Vucevic be more aggressive in the paint against some of these better big men in the league, with some of the best in the league, because if we see this Vooch come playoff time, it's going to be an early exit for the Bulls. Now, DeRozan had an okay game in the sense that he really started to turn it on in the second half, but you probably saw DeRozan isn't getting up as many shots as we used to, at least in these last 2 games where we've seen. He didn't get to the foul line as much either in this one. And I don't know if I would say it's because of a lack of effort on his part. I think it's more so that teams are starting to figure DeRozan out. You double team him in the mid-range and he's not going to be as effective. And when other guys aren't stepping up on the scoring front, teams know they can do that and they can beat the Bulls. DeMar still managed to score 25 points on 10 for 20 shooting, 5 rebounds, and 7 assists. So you take a step back and you say, well, this was still a pretty good game for DeMar, but he was also minus 24 in box plus minus, which was a team low, and he had 4 turnovers. Ayo did have himself a pretty good game, although he was getting outworked pretty badly by Donovan Mitchell, which sometimes that's to be expected because it's Donovan Mitchell. But Ayo had 15 points in this one, was more active and aggressive on the scoring front. He shot 6 for 11. He also had 6 assists. What's crazy is that the Bulls actually had 28 assists tonight compared to the Jazz 20, who were one of the best passers in the game, but it certainly didn't feel that way when you were watching it. Oh, and I talked about a lack of game planning. I mean, you have to put some of the blame on this recent slump that the Bulls are going through on coaching, because going against a team like the Jazz, who are one of the best pick and roll teams in the league and one of the best outside shooting teams in the league, you need to ensure you're doing everything in your power to counter their offense by defending the perimeter and recognizing screens and follow-throughs on the pick and roll. Like, that's something that killed the Bulls in the game against the Kings, and you would expect some adjustments to be made after that game, but it was just more of the same thing that we saw tonight against the Jazz. Also, pushing guys, getting in their ear to fight and play with a sense of urgency going into the playoffs, that's on coaching. Not saying it's all on coaching, because the guys have to want it enough themselves too, but some of that is on the coach to be pushing these guys more, to want it more, and to elevate their game. But anyway, I don't know if there's much more I can say about this one. I mean, I feel like I vented enough at the beginning anyway. I just hope the Bulls can get their act together, and even if it's in a loss to their next game against the Suns, that it's at least done with some hustle and effort and urgency, knowing that the playoffs are right around the corner. Let me know what you guys think, though. Maybe I'm making this more than it needs to be. Let me know in the comments, and as always, be sure to subscribe if you're a Bulls fan, as I do post daily Bulls content. Thanks again for tuning in, guys, and I will catch you in the next one.